Good morning guys, and welcome to my unboxing and review of the high-grade Pale Rider ground heavy equipment type. This is a 2015 P Bandai exclusive that I got for about $20, which is typical high-grade price in the US. So I'm excited to see this kit fully built because I'm a pretty big fan of the Pale Rider. I really like how it looks being a development of either the Ground Gundam or Ground Gym, I can't remember which. I really like these heavy-duty one-year war era ground suits from these whack-ass one-year war side stories. Always fun to see. So this kit, I don't know if it's exactly this one, but I know the Pale Rider High Grade originated as a pack-in exclusive for, I think, the collector's edition of the Missing Link game on the PlayStation 3. And that kit was not the greatest. I remember hearing that the construction wasn't super nice, and it was like a gigantic sticker fest, and it was really color inaccurate. I don't know if that exactly applies to this kit, but I'm interested to find out. Of course, this kit I will just be calling the Pale Rider Ground or Pale Rider Ground type for brevity. I don't want to be saying ground heavy equipment type every single time I reference this kit. And the main difference between this and the other versions of the Pale Rider, like the space type, is the weaponry. This includes the 180mm cannon that was famously used by the Gundam Ground Type and 8th MS team, as well as this very one-year war ground mobile suit style shield with the kind of physical weapon, like spike-like weapons there at the bottom, and that very industrial rail thing at the top. So of course this is going to be a standard Premium Bandai style box with this in a monochrome navy blue with very little information around the box. So let's get right into it. So, starting with the manual, this is going to be getting a standard style manual, which I'm a little surprised at. Normally with these P Bandai high grades, you really only get like a monochrome manual with minimal detail, including the color guide in monochrome, which is a little annoying, but it's nice to see a standard style high grade manual here. So of course we have this full spread of the Pale Rider ground type here. I believe this is the painted build of it. And getting to the manual, of course, you will have a full info spread of the Pale Rider, talking about the Hades system, the weapons there with the large spikes in the shield, the 180mm cannon, the 90mm bullpup rifle, etc. Unfortunately, all in Japanese, because this is before they started printing the manuals in both Japanese and in English. And then getting into the actual construction after the parts list there. This does look like it's going to be a pretty standard UC high grade build, a modern high grade that is, but before like Witcher Mercury normalized the kind of removal of polycaps from these builds, this is going to be a polycap build. But apart from that, it looks like it's going to be a pretty typical high-grade build, just talking about the usual assembly order there. Some more information about the Mobile Suit Gundam side stories with the Missing Link, talking about presumably the development of the RX-80 Pale Rider there. And then as shown earlier, the end of the assembly is going to be the weapons. Again, this large spike shield, very typical of one-year war era ground mobile suits, the 90mm bullpup rifle, the leg missile pods, and then the 180mm cannon, which will be mounted on a sub-arm on the backpack. So yeah, all pretty typical stuff. Presumably this is also going to come with stickers or parts to display the Pale Rider with either the standard mode or Hades on. So getting into the contents of the box. We will be getting 3 bags of runners in the box, so pretty typical parts count for a high grade, and I do see a rather large sticker sheet in there, which is unfortunate, but we'll get into the contents of the bags right now. So inside the bags we will get 9 runners here. Some of these runners are quite small, so it is a pretty typical parts count for a modern high grade, as well as this very, very large sticker sheet, which is rather unfortunate. It does look like a lot of these are going to be parts you would expect, like these eye and camera stickers here, one for the standard mode in green and one for the Hades mode on in red. It looks like we are going to be getting a lot of metallic gold details here, also things I wouldn't really expect to be color accurate in a high grade. But then you have all these gigantic color correcting stickers in white, which is very unfortunate to see that so much of this kit is color inaccurate. I'm not exactly sure if I'm going to be painting this kit. I'm probably going to be pretty strapped for time in the coming week, so I will probably just slap the stickers on and see how it looks like that. So getting into the runners themselves, like I mentioned earlier, this, while being a modern high grade, this is still in that era where high grades were using polycaps, so this will be including a large sheet of 1/144th scale polycaps here from PC001. These runners were printed in January of 2025.
All right, so getting to runner A, then this is going to be pretty much all of our armor parts, and the primary color of this kit being a slightly pale blue color, which is fairly unique. I don't recall really ever seeing this color in other mobile suits, but again, it fits being the pale rider, having a lot of kind of pale blue armor parts. So this is going to include a lot of very distinctive parts for things like the shoulders. You see the skirts there, you see parts for the feet, you see the legs, you see the head here. Unfortunately, unlike something like the high-grade Blue Destiny exam, it doesn't seem like we're going to be building two heads, so you can like swap the heads out to display it in either normal mode or Hades mode on, depending on what you want. So it looks like you will have to choose one when you're building this kit, which is a little unfortunate. We're going to be many more armor parts in this black color. You see very distinctive parts for the torso, the front and the back there, the sides of the legs. You see the bottoms of the feet, the backpack, the little forehead armor piece there that where something like the visor would be for the Gym Sniper 2, this has just a piece of like forehead armor. So yeah, all of that in this nice black. Runner C, going to be all of our frame and joint parts that are not polycaps, of course, in this kit, in this kind of primer frame gray, a little lighter than other frame parts, but still gray nonetheless. So you see a lot of inner frame parts for things like the waist, the side thrusters in the legs, things like joints for, I think, the elbows. You see parts for the shoulders and stuff. You see thruster details here. All of these kind of auxiliary frame and joint parts, as well as the two standard high-grade holding hands that come with this kit. It doesn't look like we're going to be getting any other hand options, which is a little unfortunate. We'll be getting two of Runner D, which only includes one part for the visor of the Pale Rider, either in green for the standard mode or red for the Hades on mode. Again, unfortunately, it looks like we will only be getting one head in this kit, so you have to choose which version you want to assemble when you're building the kit. Runner E here, going to be weapon parts here. We have the two halves of the 90mm bullpup rifle, as well as the barrel for it, and we also have the inner frame of the, I don't remember what it's called, like the spike shield or something, that very rugged ground mobile suit 1 year war era Federation shield, with a part for the arm of the shield, I believe, and then these two are going to be parts for, I think, the sub arm on the backpack for the 180mm cannon. Speaking of which, on Runner F here, we will be getting the rest of our weapon parts for the 180mm cannon, two halves of sandwich together for the main body of the cannon, two parts for the barrel, some auxiliary parts up here. We have the leg missile pods, and then we have additional parts for the spike shield there, the actual spikes themselves, and an additional outer layered piece of armor for color accuracy. And last but not least, to use with the two beam sabers that this kit has, we get the venerable SB13 for a standard set of 1/144th scale beam saber effect parts in clear pink. You've seen this runner a million times before, not really much to say about it here. So what looks like a pretty simple and typical high-grade build. The real question is how egregious those color-correcting stickers are going to look on this kit, but we'll find out after the build.
All right, welcome back. Here's the high-grade Pale Rider ground type, all snap-built, panel-lined, and lightly painted, because there were a number of color inaccuracies in this kit, but we'll get to that in a second. So getting right into the build then. This kit is about 10 years old or so. It came out in 2015, I believe, and is heavily based on the 2014 Pale Rider. I think it's called like the metallic color version that came with the premium edition of the Missing Link PS3 game. And that version of the Pale Rider was very much like kind of sticker hell, and it was very basic, and it has a reputation for not really holding up to the standards of the time. This kit, being heavily based on that, also falls into a lot of those traps. You should be seeing the parts list up on the screen right about now, and it is highly simplified. The build for this kit doesn't really feel like a kit from 2015. It feels like a kit double its age. Like, this kind of build is very similar to what I remember the Jim Striker build being, and that kit's from like 2006, and that kit even has better part separation in a lot of places. This kit is highly simplified. It lacks a ton of part separation, and all in all, it feels a little underwhelming. Even less frame than high grades normally have. Literally, like I said a few days ago in my video on the gun cannon detector, pretty much all the frame you see is what you get. So this is a highly simplified build, and it's not really that great. It doesn't really hold up. Even like 10 years ago when this kit came out, it was a little bit off and not quite up to the quality that high-grade builds have reached at that point. So aesthetics then. This is where a lot of the, I guess, issues with this kit crop up, especially in terms of color accuracy. As you can see, this kit is very much sticker hell, and I didn't even use most of them, because you get about double the stickers you actually do need. With you being given the choice to build this kit in one of two kind of modes. In the standard mode, which is what I built with the green visor, the color scheme is very kind of somber and muted, with a lot of the stickers and color changing parts being a white and gray color scheme. I felt like that kind of somber, muted color scheme really fit the Pale Rider a lot more than the Hades mode on color scheme does. The Hades mode color scheme uses a lot of gold, black, and white, which does give it a little splash of color, especially in things like the chest vents and parts for the side arm adapters and things like that, but it doesn't really match the Pale Rider all that much, so I opted to not go for it. And unfortunately, the choice you make for the color scheme is semi-permanent. While you can remove the stickers for the color scheme or paint over it, if you choose to build, say, the standard color scheme and you don't like how it looks, you try it out in Hades mode. But what if you don't like how Hades mode looks and you want to switch back? Your only option at that point is to paint, because the stickers will look awful, especially with the way you're supposed to apply them. Especially in these vents, you have to very much press them into these recessed details and make them kind of fit, which leads to a lot of crinkling if you don't get it right first try, so it looks pretty bad in a lot of cases. I've gotten away with it a little bit more because on camera it doesn't look quite as bad as in person, but in person it's extremely noticeable if the stickers have a little bit of a wrinkle in them. So before I talk about the aesthetics of this kit in terms of sculpt and things like that and how I feel about it, I'm first going to go over this sticker sheet, go over the stickers I used, and then talk about all the color inaccuracies that I had to paint over, or that I didn't bother painting over, and that you would have to if you want a fully accurate Pale Rider. So sticker 1 is going to be the usual, is going to be a foil sticker for the eyes going underneath a green clear part. Normally I would recommend you just paint behind a clear visor part in chrome to make the details pop, but the sticker that comes in this kit is very unique. It's highly detailed, and it does pop very nicely under that chrome. So this is one of those cases I would recommend you either replicate the sticker itself using paint or just use the sticker. It honestly looks pretty good. Sticker 2 is going to be on the 90mm bullpup rifle for this very small rectangular green metallic camera sticker on the front there, so that's also fairly normal for a high grade. Sticker 3 is going to be the front head camera above this kind of forehead armor piece, also in metallic green. Sticker 4 is going to be the rear head camera sticker there, metallic green. So all of that's pretty typical for a high grade, not really anything to hold against this kit. Stickers 5, 6, and 7 are the exact same stickers for the eyes and head cameras, but in red for Hades mode. Moving on to the stickers I did use for 10 and 11, those two are going to be the stickers for the top chest vents here. As you can see, it has a white border with a gray vent that you have to press in there, and it doesn't really look that great. The seam is very visible in that corner there. Stickers 14 and 15 are going to be the same, some vent details in white and gray, except it's going to be on these lower jaw parts on the head, which honestly don't look all that terrible, mostly because of how small they are, so the folds and creases in them don't look too bad, especially at the typical distance you're going to be looking at your models from. Stickers 25 and 26, then you get 2 of each. They're going to be used on these leg thruster units, that look very similar to something like the Alex, for these white vent detail, for these white border details that go around the vent, which is color separated in that booster there, so that is a nice color separated detail. Stickers 33 and 34 are going to be these vent details on the front skirts, a gray vent detail with a white border, as is typical for the standard color scheme. And stickers 35 and 36 are going to be the main chest vents here. You really have to press these in, and they don't look that great. As you can see, the black that the part is molded in is showing through some of the seams, so it doesn't look all that great. I did decide to paint over some of the details instead of using these stickers for the shield. So as you can see, as you saw in the unboxing section, the shield is highly color inaccurate. Pretty much the entire shield, besides this large plate in the front, is going to be in a very dark gray. So all of this is painted in. You get stickers for the white parts, for these 2 kind of bolts in the front, and these 2 long accent stripes coming down the side. The rest of this is all painted over. So getting into the color inaccurate details that I painted over, or that I decided not to paint over, starting with the shield, because I do have it in front of the camera right now. This bar at the top is supposed to be in white. It is just in gray, and this blue accent part is supposed to be in the same blue as the kit. I unfortunately did not have access to paint that matched the kit. I used Gundam markers to kind of correct color details and stuff like that, and I did not have one that matched this paint. I started by using MSV light blue, but that was closer to a gray teal, so it didn't really match. I instead opted for Goof Blue from the advanced marker set, which has kind of the opposite problem. It's a little too saturated, but it is closer to the blue than the light blue is from the MSV set. And it looks okay, as you can see here. The accents on the shield, once it's fully color accurate, does make it look fairly unique. It's quite interesting. But it's just, without any of that painting, it looks very, very drab, and I'm not really a fan of it. So on the kit itself, starting with the head, this forehead this kind of forehead detail here in this forehead armor, the center part, the center hexagon, is supposed to be in a lighter gray. I painted that in using Xeon Gray, which once dried looks a little darker than I would like, but is fairly close to the color it's supposed to be. On the shoulders then, these outer parts here are supposed to be color separated in gray. Again, I use Xeon Gray for that. It is just molded in the same main color of blue that the Pale Rider is in on the kit. So a little unfortunate there. Again, highly simplified part separation and things like that. So things that you would expect to be separate parts in a modern build, like these chest vents and these parts on the shoulders, are simply not in this kit, which is a little unfortunate. Sticking to the arms then, and the forearms here, this center part and the side recessed details are supposed to be in the same gray as the frame. As you can see, it is kind of the case on the leg adapters, but it is not the case for the arm adapters, so you will have to paint that in if you want it to be color accurate. Torso then is actually mostly color accurate, apart from the parts that you need stickers for, obviously, so that not really much to talk about there. In the waist then, in the crotch, this center section is supposed to have a white border around this lower vent that I did paint in, but out of the box it is just molded in the same blue as the rest of the kit is in. On the back then, while you do get stickers for the front skirts to make these vent parts accurate, you don't get them for the back. So I did paint this in using Seed Gray for the gray part and using New White from the advanced marker set for the lower border part here. Oh, and if I didn't mention it earlier, that New White is also what I used for the shield. In the legs then, this actually is mostly color accurate. It's just, I believe these recessed stripe details around this gray part of frame that's poking out for the leg, like kind of sub thrusters, is supposed to be in gray, so you will have to detail paint that in as well. And on the ankles, these, the bits of ankle armor on the side are supposed to be in dark gray, kind of shaded in here. I shaded them in with a gray panel liner. They don't look the greatest, but at a glance they look fine. That is just molded in the same blue as the rest of the armor, as the rest of the armor is, as you would expect. So yeah, a lot of color inaccuracies on this kit, even with the massive amount of stickers that you have to use on this kit, which is very unfortunate, and again, makes this kit feel about twice as old as it actually is. So in terms of the sculpt then, with the mold, the Pale Rider is actually fairly accurate out of the box, which is nice. I do wish that they could have extended that accuracy to the colors, but only having kind of mold accuracy is better than nothing, especially considering the Pale Rider is one of my favorite When Your War era suits, alongside something like the Slave Wraith, which I also really like. This kit very much feels like what it is, an ace unit based on, I think it's the ground gym or something like that, that's used to test experimental equipment. It looks very much like a high-tech, heavy-duty gym, and it looks pretty awesome. I'm not the biggest fan of the center placement of the large head antenna here, but apart from that, the mold is pretty cool. Lots of varied geometry here, details from a lot of other kits. You have the 180mm cannon, which I believe is supposed to be the same, or at least a modified version of the one used with the Ground Gundam, which is a quite nice and impressive weapon. Fortunately, you don't have gimmicks like the magazine being removable, but we'll talk about that in a moment. And things like the sub-generators from the Alex to give this kit kind of a high mobility appearance, in addition to its more rugged, thicker armor than something you would see on even the ground gym. With the very geometry in the shoulders giving the impression this is some kind of layered armor, making the model kit appear more durable, as well as this layered mix of forearm adapters and extra armor, also bulking up the arms a little bit to give the impression that this is a heavy-duty, more armored up kind of ace version of something like a gym. So all of that is very cool, and once you apply the stickers or paint in all of the details to make it color accurate, the Pale Rider does look very, very good in high-grade form. So for a quick size comparison, here's the high-grade Pale Rider ground type right next to a standard-sized high-grade, being the high-grade Blue Destiny Unit 1. As you can see, the Pale Rider is slightly taller than the Blue Destiny Unit 1, so in terms of vertical space, it will take about the size of an average high-grade on your shelf. The vertical antenna on the head there will take up a little extra room, but just keep in mind that this will take up a little more extra kind of depth-wise space if you choose to display it firing the 180mm cannon. In terms of accessories then, here is the high-grade Pale Rider ground type with everything it comes with. So this is about the arsenal you would expect from a kit like this. Not much is missing apart from some hand option parts, but apart from that, this is a pretty complete accessory spread for this mobile suit. So starting as usual with the hand options, all you're going to get here are typical high-grade holding hands with kind of rectangular holes in them to just slot in weapons. Not much to talk about there. Little unfortunately, you don't get something like an open expressive hand, but what are you going to do? So starting with the main handheld ranged weapon of this kit, besides of course the 180mm cannon we'll talk about in a moment, we get the 90mm bullpup rifle here, which is about as simple a high-grade weapon as you can get. It is literally two halves sandwiched together with a third part for the barrel. I do like the sculpt of this weapon, but there's not really much to say about it besides that. It looks good on the Pale Rider, and there's not really much to say. You can't really do much with it apart from just have the Pale Rider hold it. There's no gimmicks like removable magazines or anything like that. Next up, we have the leg missile pods here. Also, not really much to say about these. They will just slot into the leg adapters. They are literally 2 parts that sandwich together, a box here and a part for the doors. There's no mechanism for the doors to open, very typical for a high grade, and they're extremely simple, but they do serve to add a little extra variation to the geometry of the Pale Rider's legs and bulk it up a little bit. You will get 2 standard beam sabers. Mounted here are the side skirts in a fairly unique mount for a high grade, but there's not really much to say about them. They are just your standard high grade beam sabers, molded in the same kind of pale blue that the Pale Rider's armor is in. To use with those beam sabers then, you will have, in typical standard HGUC fashion, 2 standard 1/144 scale beam saber effect parts in clear pink. Not much to say about these. We've seen these a million times before in other kits, and they look fine. For the shield, you will get this very rugged kind of Federation ground mobile suit shield, similar to something you would see in the high-grade Ground Gundam Revive. I think this is the same exact kind of mold for the shield that we saw in the Gym Striker, which is a 20-year-old kit, or almost a 20-year-old kit, so again, another way this kit feels much older than it actually is. It looks rugged, it looks quite good, especially once you painted it over, to vary the colors a little bit. Otherwise, like I mentioned earlier, it looks a little drab. You have some hollow parts in the back here, but not that big a deal to complain about. The hollow parts in these spikes at the end are a little more annoying, but again, it's a high grade, that was kind of to be expected. There is a small bit of articulation in the actual shield itself with these spikes popping out, so you can pose your Pale Rider using it as a weapon if you want. To mount this onto the mobile suit, you just have a little tab here that just clips onto the arm adapter, very simple. And then you have the kind of main star of the show as far as accessories go, the 180mm cannon mounted on a subarm on the back. So unfortunately, this doesn't really have any articulation itself to kind of unfold the barrel, to seamlessly pose the Pale Rider kind of just deploying the weapon. It is a slight parse formation, but the subarm will kind of swing down like so. The barrel will pop off. It just kind of remounts onto the end. Yeah, it just kind of clips onto the end like so. A handle will pop up, which is a little hard to get into, especially since I cut my nails. The handle will pop up, and then you just kind of slot it into the Pale Rider's hand. Not really, no separation required, so it'll just slot in, and it looks fine. Just be careful you don't grab it by this little bracket that holds the barrel to the side when it's not in deployed mode. So yeah, pretty cool weapon here, and I'm excited to see how it looks in the posing section. So for articulation then, starting as usual with the head, for an upward look, it will look about that far, not a super high look upwards. All of this articulation is going to be the same as any other kind of older polycap HGUC kit, so if you built any standard HGUC kit from like the mid-2000s to the late 2000s or so, you'll know exactly the articulation you're going to get with this kit. It can look down pretty much into its own chest, which is quite nice. You'll get some fairly nice side-to-side tilt, full 360 rotation, so everything you would expect from a high grade. The shoulder can not move independently of the arm, so for side raises, you will only get a little more than 90 degrees before the arm will want to pop out of the socket. You do have a shoulder swing forward, although it isn't the greatest, as you can see before it collides with the torso. You will get full rotation in the upper bicep, as you would expect. Full double bend in the elbow to give almost a 180 degree bend. And the wrist is going to be on a ball joint, which will do ball joint things. For the torso then, for ab crunch, you will get a slight forward crunch, nothing too crazy, a slight backwards crunch, some small side to side tilt, nothing crazy, and a full 360 rotation about a ball joint as you would expect. For the skirts then, the front skirts will come together on the runner. I have clipped them apart, so they can rotate independently. You will get just about 90 degrees out of the front skirts, no detail on the underside as you would expect from a high grade. The side skirts can raise a little more than 45 degrees. The back skirt is fixed in place as you would expect. The hips will have a kind of pivot mechanism, so one leg can swing back while the other swings forward. Nothing too crazy, but it can help in some like grounded defensive poses. For forward kicks, you will get about a 90 degree bend. For side raises, you will get about a 90 degree bend. And then for rear kicks, you're locked to about 45 degrees. So pretty average articulation for a high grade. Rotation in the upper thigh, full double bend in the knee. Unfortunately, with how large this rear booster is on the lower leg, it will collide with the thigh fairly early into the bend, so you will only get a little more than 90 degrees. The ankle armor can move up and down, like so. No toe separation. The whole foot can tilt down about that far. Upwards pretty far, which is quite nice. And you get some okay side to side tilt.
So this articulation is very typical of a high grade from like the late 2000s. Not really much to comment on. It is very much, it's dated, but it does the job fine. So let's see the articulation in action in some poses.
So getting the Pale Rider ground type into a bit of a spin, starting as usual with the running and gunning pose. Despite the Pale Rider feeling much older than it actually is, those polycap joints, while a little loose, are still enough to have this kit perform a running and gunning pose, bouncing at one foot very easily. It looks fairly convincing, because the Pale Rider isn't super complex or that heavy or unbalanced of a kit, so despite the rather large weapon hanging off one side of its back, it can still hold this balance fairly well, and it does look quite good doing it. Despite this kit being called the ground type, it does look a lot better in the air, as you'll see in a moment, but this kit is definitely one that looks a lot better in motion as opposed to a lot of the other kits I've been taking a look at recently, because of the very high mobility nature of this kit with all the extra thrusters and boosters and things all over it, all the very geometry and details and stuff. It definitely looks a lot better when it's mimicking some kind of motion instead of being stationary or preparing or in a defensive pose. The 90mm bullpup rifle looks okay with this kit, definitely looks a lot better in these kind of quick firing poses where the Pale Rider looks like it's just kind of snapping up to shoot at a target pretty quickly before relocating. It's definitely not something I would pose this kit firing as the kind of main weapon, but it's serviceable and it is fine for what it is, and this is definitely a pose I would consider posing this kit in on the shelf, but maybe rework to use the 180mm cannon instead. So next up here we have the Pale Rider kneeling, posing as if it's kind of finishing an enemy off with the spike shield extending downward, and this is to show off a couple of things. One, the kit can kneel fairly easily and well, and it looks okay doing so, but again, it looks a lot worse in this very stationary, almost defensive pose with how kind of scrunched up and low it is to the ground compared to when it is in motion or in the air. Second, while having the articulation gimmick of the spikes in the shield being able to come out and pose the kit like it's using it as a weapon is fine and it's cool that it's there, I wouldn't really use it because it's not super dynamic or anything. It doesn't really complement any kind of motion that the Pale Rider can pull off all that well, and it's fairly uninteresting as a weapon, especially compared to the main option the Pale Rider has for the weapon, the 180mm cannon, which again you'll see in a moment. While I think this can look cool, especially if you do a little diorama with something like a high-grade Zaku on the ground and you model the kit like it's been ripped apart by the Pale Rider spike shield, it can look pretty cool, but just by itself I would definitely not consider posing this as an option, especially with how color inaccurate and drab it looks if you don't paint the shield. So getting the Pale Rider into the air, doing my best recreation of the Hades mode pose where it's dual wielding beam sabers and charging forward. Obviously, I did not build the kit like it is in Hades mode. I'm just trying to recreate the pose seen on the back of the manual and in the promo art and all that. And it looks okay. The Pale Rider is definitely something that looks much better in the air, much better in motion, so that's a plus for it. Unfortunately, I don't think the beam sabers are really it. I do wish it had something else as a melee weapon to complement this kind of pose, especially built in Hades pose and you want to show it going berserk or something. I did notice that if you look at the forearms there's like a little detail on the bottom. I'm not sure if that's a barrel for like a wrist-mounted Vulcan or something, or if that's a mount for a wrist-mounted beam saber. If you know, let me know in the comments below. But if this did have beam tonfa like wrist-mounted beam sabers, that would definitely look really, really cool if you build it in Hades mode and doing that. You could probably modify the forearm adapter to accommodate the beam saber effect parts if you just take like a 1mm pin vise or something and then just drill a little hole. I did not do that, but I think that might be a decent option for making this kit look more dynamic, wielding the beam sabers. Apart from that, I wouldn't super recommend using the beam sabers, especially when there is a much more interesting option in this kit, the 180mm beam rifle, which we'll take a look at right now. So here is the Pale Rider in the air doing a relocating pose where it's zipping off to the side and firing off a quick shot with the 180mm rifle, like kind of downward to its side. And this is definitely the star of the show. This is the main weapon of this kit for good reason, and a lot of people are probably going to pose it using it. And it's because it is large, it's impressive, and it looks awesome, quite frankly. I really like how the 180mm cannon looks in this very clean black, as opposed to like the standard primer gray color that you've seen this weapon in before in things like the high-grade Ground Gundam Revive. That's a fantastic kit, and I really like the 180mm cannon there, but this modified version on the subarm definitely has it beat. just in terms of how cool it looks. This is definitely the heavy ground equipment that this kit is named after, and it's one that I would definitely consider using this kit with on the shelf. It looks great in motion, the Pale Rider having to kind of pivot all of its body weight to balance the weapon and fire it. The kind of limited articulation that the weapon has and forcing the arm to behave in a specific way to even like get the handle into the hand is a little annoying at first, but I think in terms of looks it definitely pays off, again showing off how kind of large, almost unwieldy this weapon is, with how it needs to be supported with a sub-arm to even be used, and how, again, the Pale Rider needs to swing its entire hips to get it to fire to the side in any believable way. Again, it gives it this sense of weight, which you'll see when in the conclusion section when I show it off on the ground firing this weapon. So yeah, this is definitely an awesome weapon. This is a cool pose, and something I would definitely consider having this kit doing on my shelf. So the high-grade Pale Rider ground heavy equipment type is certainly a kit that exists. While I really like this design, like I mentioned earlier, this is one of my favorite One-Year War era designs alongside something like the Slave Wraith, which I don't have yet. I'm really looking forward to if Bandai reprints it, but the Pale Rider, while the design is great, this kit doesn't really do it justice. This is a around 10-year-old kit that feels like it's 20 years old. Especially in terms of part separation, color separation, this kit is severely lacking. The original high-grade Pale Rider, I think Metallic Finish version it was called, that came with the side story game that the Pale Rider debuted in, the premium version of it, was heavily criticized for the exact same problems I'm having with this kit now. Really bad part separation, really bad color separation, feeling really underwhelming compared to kits of the time. And unfortunately, a lot of that transferred over to this version of the Pale Rider. As much as I love this design, I really wish it got a better kit to do it justice. It's an extremely simple kit in terms of parts count, which means that it also feels a little floppy because it has even less frame than a normal high-grade would. In terms of color accuracy, it is extremely poor. You saw the absolute sticker hell that this kit was, especially with the way you need to apply the stickers, kind of pressing them into recessed details and gaps and things in a way that causes the stickers to either rip or crease or fold or look awful. It's kind of hard to tell on camera, but in person, it's extremely noticeable. On my shelf right now, the corners for the chest vent stickers, the little white parts, are folding up a little bit, so at some point I might just rip them off and repaint those details in myself with new white Gundam marker or something. Especially if you want a color-accurate model and you want to use paint instead of the included color-correcting stickers, be prepared to do a lot of very annoying small detail painting that you really shouldn't have to, especially for a 2015 high grade. This is really disappointing. While this kit is really cool in terms of the equipment it comes with, the 180mm cannon is frankly awesome. I do really like that ground EFF mobile suit, very sturdy like spike shield. I like the 90mm bullpup rifle. The leg missile pods are pretty cool that come with it. Unfortunately, those positives don't really balance out the horrible color inaccuracies on this kit, especially on the shield. Honestly, the shield looks really, really bad if you don't paint it in with how just monotone it is. It's almost entirely gray and dark and black, which is just not a great look. While they do give stickers for the white parts, those are wraparound stickers that go on very small kind of ledge details on the shield, so expect those to fold up very, very quickly, and if you're going to paint something, definitely paint the shield over. Also, unfortunately, the shade of blue on this kit is very faded and unique, so I don't know if there's a Gundam marker that actually matches it. So if you want a quick, easy paint solution, I don't know if it exists. You might just have to mix your own paint to match the shade of blue on this kit. I used Goof Blue, and it's just way too saturated for this kit, like I mentioned earlier. I thought the light blue that came in the MSV marker set would work, but it's just way too gray to fit this kit. So that mismatch of blue is also a little annoying, and some of the details on the shield are extremely annoying to paint. I don't know if you noticed it, but there's the small little details on the underside of the bar at the top is very hard for a Gundam marker to get into. You definitely need like a fine brush to properly paint those parts. So yeah, between the extremely annoying detail painting that you need, the extremely poor color accuracy, the very bad parts count of this kit, and just the way this kit feels way older than it actually is in a bad way, I can't honestly recommend this kit. The only thing stopping me from full stop saying don't buy this kit is the price. $20 for what you get here is not horrible. I would still expect a kit like this to be priced at like between $16 to $18, especially with how poor the part separation and stuff is on this kit compared to a lot of other kits. But $20 is kind of reasonable, I guess. But the main reason I'm saying not to buy this kit is because we've gotten other Pale Rider kits on Premium Bandai, of course, and a lot of them incorporate a bunch of new parts that I believe alleviate a lot of the issues with this kit. You can correct me if I'm wrong in the comments. I don't have those kits. I've been waiting for them to get reprinted, and they just haven't been. But if you want a Pale Rider that doesn't have a lot of the issues I'm talking about with this Pale Rider, then you should definitely look for if P Bandai reprints the Pale Rider Cavalry or the Todesritter, both of which are the Pale Rider just with different parts, different equipment, much more interesting takes on the Pale Rider compared to this kit. If you are really in love with this version of the Pale Rider, they do seem to be reprinting the ground heavy equipment type fairly often. So if you have access to Premium Bandai where you live, you can consider it. Just know what you're getting into, especially with the horrible part separation, the horrible color separation, and the need for a lot of annoying small detail painting that you really shouldn't have to do on a kit like this. So that was my review of the high-grade Pale Rider ground heavy equipment type. What do you think of this kit? I was pretty disappointed in this kit, to be honest, because of how much I like the Pale Rider design, but let me know what you thought of this kit in the comments below. If you like this review, give it a like. If you like reviews like these, please consider subscribing to my channel, and I'll see you next time with my review of the Master Grade Strike Rouge with Otori Striker Pack. I'll see you then.